Thousands of miles from Helmand, this hangar is where some of the deadliest attacks on the Taliban are launched. Each cabin is a ground station for the RAF's Reapers, in flight thousands of miles away. They're the most high-profile and controversial of Britain's unmanned aerial vehicles, known by most as drones. Unmanned systems vary in size, from the tiny like this Black Hornet through to the relative giants like the Army's Watchkeeper. One thing they all have in common though, the MOD is at pains to point out that there's always a man in the loop. They're not what you might term autonomous, and most are just used for reconnaissance. Certainly these two are. Some though are armed, and they do fire their weapons. From the safety of Lincolnshire, pilots support troops on the ground. They can watch potential targets and take their time deciding whether to engage. And they do it day in, day out, rather than in the pressure cooker of a brief tour.
What it does mean is that we build up a big knowledge base and experience level of operations in Afghanistan. I've been flying operations now for 3.5 years, and many of my colleagues have a similar experience level, and that makes a big difference to the service we can give to the troops in Afghanistan.
The Ministry of Defence has changed tack on unmanned systems. They've started talking to journalists about them, stressing that there's nothing sinister.
I think unmanned air systems, or as we prefer, remotely piloted air systems, bring a huge range of operational benefits. They're able to assist, they deliver unparalleled intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and when necessary, precision strike. On that basis, I think they're here to stay.
In British use, the Reaper is principally a reconnaissance asset, getting key detail to the troops on the ground. The sensors on board can tell the difference between the suspicious, the entirely innocent, and the downright hostile. And when it comes to it, the Reaper packs a lethal punch. The Army's Watchkeeper is unarmed, but no less use in keeping tabs on the Taliban. And the Royal Navy too is embarking on a voyage into the unmanned. The Scan Eagle is now operational in the Gulf.
We may be investigating contacts that have missiles on board and potentially would want to shoot down a manned helicopter as it approached to get identification. We would now be able to send in an unmanned system like this, always with a man operating it. However, it would be doing the dangerous task of closing to get that identification. But while the RAF is soon to double its Reaper fleet to 10 aircraft, there is a snag in terms of their future after Afghanistan. Unmanned aircraft this big are not currently allowed into UK or European airspace.
We need to be clear that we have to maintain the really high levels of training and experience that we currently have. So as long as we do the right things over the next 18 months to make sure that that capability is available to be used whenever and wherever it's required, then we've done our job.
It'll be harder without flying hours though, won't it? I mean, you'd have to keep flying it somewhere, surely.
Yeah, and at the moment we have a footprint in the US which allows us access to training ranges in the US. So there are always options available to us, and our job is to make sure that those options are as open as they can be.
There's no question that drones, as most will continue to call them, remain controversial, and this new openness is an attempt to dispel some of the myths that surround them. But they've become such a key part of the battle in Afghanistan that there's no question they're here to stay. Well, among those getting the grand tour here at RAF Waddington today is the Defence Secretary Philip Hammond. Thank you for joining us. Why is there this sudden openness about unmanned systems?
Well, we always have to balance, on the one hand, operational security requirements, and on the other hand, our desire to be as transparent as we possibly can. And part of what we're trying to do today is demystify remotely piloted air systems, explain to people how they work, how the safeguards and controls around them are exactly the same as for manned aircraft, to show off the technological capability of the systems and how they are likely to form an important part of our setup in the future going forward.
Of course, around the world, the drone, perhaps for want of a better word that isn't an acronym, has a bad name because of the way that it's employed in certain countries. Is that unfair? Is that the sort of thing that could happen with a manned system just as well?
I think with most things, it's about how you use them rather than what they are. We're very clear about how we use our systems. We use them in accordance with international law, humanitarian law, and in Afghanistan we operate them in accordance with the mandate we have under United Nations Security Council resolutions, exactly as we operate manned aircraft systems. But these platforms offer a step change in the level of support we're able to give to our troops. The vast majority of operations with unmanned air systems are reconnaissance gathering in support usually of troops on the ground, and they have de-risked operations on the ground for our ground forces very significantly, and they will be a part of any future campaign.
There is still concern about civilian casualties, though. How does the Royal Air Force try to minimise those? How can Britain be sure that it is in keeping with its legal obligations on that front?
Well, we're always concerned about the potential for civilian casualties and collateral damage, and in a warfighting situation you can never absolutely guarantee that there won't be collateral damage. But we apply the same systems, the same safeguards, the same protections that we use with our manned aircraft, and so far the operating record of these aircraft has been extremely good.
And just briefly, I mean, this technology is here to stay then?
Technology is very definitely here to stay. Our fleet in the future will be a mix of manned aircraft and unmanned air systems, that's for sure.